Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
I'm with Mr. K Razdan, an old PTI hand. Mr. Razdan, welcome to ThePrint. I know that you joined PTI in 1965 and retired just recently in 2016. And in all these years, almost 50 years, I think, that you've been both general manager, CEO, and editor-in-chief. So once again, welcome to ThePrint.
Thank you.
Mr. Razdan, my first question to you is about this controversy over PTI and Prasar Bharati. Supposedly, Prasar Bharati, as reported in the papers, has written to PTI a couple of days ago over the interview that PTI took of the Chinese ambassador in India, Mr. Sun Weidong. Again, this is not in the letter, but this is reported in the media. And according to this letter, it says that Prasar Bharati, which is a big contributor, which is a big subscriber, to PTI, is going to review its subscription because PTI's news coverage is detrimental to national interest. Now, as an old PTI hand, what would you say?
At the outset, I would say it's a very unfortunate controversy. And it's very sad that PTI is being virtually called an anti-national entity.
Right.
I'm only telling you from what I have read in the media.
Yes.
I'm told that the letter from Prasar Bharati says that PTI's news coverage was detrimental to national interest and undermined India's territorial integrity.
That's right.
I mean, this is preposterous, apart from being unfair and unfortunate.
Right.
I mean, PTI is a largely public service institution.
Mm-hmm.
It was founded some 72 years ago.
Yeah, just soon after independence, wasn't it?
Yes, it was registered 12 days after India became independent, but it became operational in 1949.
Okay.
So I'm sure you know that PTI is a not-for-profit news organization.
That's right.
The leading lights of the Indian media industry came together in 1947 to set it up as a non-profit news agency so that no shareholder has a vested interest in the news coverage.
Right.
And as I said, it's regarded as a public service institution.
So what do you think happened, Mr. Razdan? Why did Prasar Bharati have to write this letter, a letter like this?
I mean, I wouldn't know. I mean, let me first clear some misconceptions.
Sure.
I think what I have seen in the social media, etc., it's presented as if PTI is getting a dole or it's getting a subsidy from Prasar Bharati.
Right.
Which is not true.
Okay.
Prasar Bharati is a subscriber.
Mm-hmm.
One of the largest subscribers, not the largest.
Okay. There are some reports that it's getting about 9.5 crores it gives PTI from the subscription.
Well, I don't know today, but I know it used to pay a little more than 9 crores, 9.15 crores.
Okay.
I'm told they are withholding some money and now the payment is around 7 crores.
Right. This is annually.
This is annually.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a newspaper which pays something like 50% more.
Okay.
Okay, so it's for the news services that PTI provides to Prasar Bharati. Mm-hmm. It's not a gift. It's not a dole. It's not a subsidy. Let's be very clear about it. Just before you called, I looked up the Prasar Bharati website.
Right.
The news services division of All India Radio has over 510 news bulletins for India and the external service. It has 44 regional news units, which put out 355 news bulletins in 67 languages.
Right.
The Doordarshan News, this is from their website. the terrestrial reach of Doordarshan News covers 49% of the Indian population.
Okay.
So, and they also have 31 regional news units, Doordarshan.
Right. So what's the link with what we're...
I'll tell you what's the link. Yeah. Besides that, Prasar Bharati has 30 FM channels. Mm-hmm. Okay, what's the link? The link is that the PTI subscription for its subscribers is based on their reach. That is, if a newspaper has a smaller circulation, it pays less.
Right.
It has been kept like that so that the small and medium newspapers do not have to pay too much. It should be within their means.
Okay.
So it is linked to their reach for the newspapers also, including PTI's own shareholders.
Mm-hmm.
In the case of Prasar Bharati, if you take the reach into account, I just gave you the figures.
Yes.
I gave you the number of news bulletins.
Right.
Now, if you go into their reach, if the terrestrial channel of Doordarshan covers half the Indian population, you can imagine the reach.
Right.
And this is the news services that are broadcast by Doordarshan.
So you think Prasar Bharati is doing PTI no favor by...
It's not doing any favor, plus it is paying less than what it should be paying. If you link it to the reach, it should be paying more.
Mm-hmm.
So let's be very, very clear. It is not a subsidy. It's not a gift. PTI News goes round the clock across the country to all the units of All India Radio, Doordarshan.
Right.
And I must also mention the FM channels of All India Radio, which are the only channels which are allowed to broadcast news. They rely on PTI News.
Yeah. So, Mr. Razdan, the fact is that when Prasar Bharati writes a letter to PTI alleging or accusing it of putting out news that is detrimental to national interest, I mean, that's a very serious charge.
Yeah, but how does it lie with Prasar Bharati to decide who is anti-national, who is detrimental to national integrity? I mean, it's a news organization ostensibly.
Right.
So it's not for them to decide. Yeah. And no other, to the best of my knowledge, no other PTI subscriber, a newspaper or whoever, they didn't raise these issues with PTI. It's for a subscriber to decide which news to publish or broadcast.
So in this question of the Chinese ambassador's interview that the PTI correspondent or chief of bureau, Mr. Manas Ghosh, took with the Chinese ambassador, what is your comment, allegedly, that this is the charge that Prasar Bharati is putting forward, that it's because of this interview that it's reviewing its subscription?
Well, you are a very distinguished journalist. You have covered foreign affairs for a long time. I also covered foreign affairs for a long time. It's in the routine for a independent media organization to try to get news from wherever news emanates from.
Yeah.
And given the current India-China spat, it would be legitimate for PTI to try and interview the Chinese ambassador.
Right.
What I understand is that PTI had sought this interview about a month before it actually happened.
I see. So this is before the June 15 clashes in which
this is well before the Chinese. Yeah, well before the June 15 clash.
In which both soldiers of both sides died.
Yes. So anyway, then the Chinese took more than a month to say yes.
Yeah.
And in the legitimate pursuit of news coverage, I think PTI sent a senior journalist who covers foreign office and defense. So he is well versed with these matters.
Right.
So I think where the problem arose, I think even before the PTI story went on the wires, the Chinese embassy put out a truncated and distorted version of the interview.
Okay.
So they put out only three one-line questions with very long answers by the ambassador. Right. I understand these are not even PTI's questions.
I see.
These are yes. And it's also my information that PTI has strongly protested to the Chinese ambassador about it.
So they made up their own questions. So they made up their own questions, you're saying, the Chinese embassy?
They made up their own questions, that's what I'm told. And PTI, I believe, has protested to the Chinese ambassador. And all the follow-up questions which the reporter asked have been totally ignored. But I think I must also mention, PTI also didn't, mishandled it in a way, because they didn't bring out all the follow-up questions in their copy.
Right.
Basically, I'm told they waited for a long time for a reaction from the External Affairs Ministry. They delayed the copy by more than 4 hours, seeking their reaction.
Before they ran the copy, before they ran the Chinese ambassador.
They delayed it by 4 hours, waiting for a reaction. The reaction didn't come, but that evening there was a briefing by the spokesman of the ministry, in which some critical remarks about China were made. No reference to the ambassador's interview, but those remarks were weaved into the PTI interview copy, which I have read in print.
Right.
So, but PTI could have, done a better job
Handled
with
this
the
better.
copy they put out, bringing out the fact that the reporter asked tough follow-up questions.
Right.
That they didn't do. But the Chinese embassy version made PTI look bad in the public eye.
So, Mr. Razdan, just to get the sequence clear, the PTI reporter goes to the Chinese ambassador, gets an interview, asks tough follow-up questions, but the Chinese embassy puts out only 3 questions on its website, and that too, those questions are not the ones that the PTI reporter asks. Am I correct?
Yes, they are their own questions.
They are their own questions. And then the PTI reporter asks the spokesperson, Mr. Anurag Srivastav, for his comments to the interview.
I don't know who they asked, but they asked the foreign office.
The foreign office.
Yeah.
Right. Asked for his comments, did not get any answers from the foreign office. PTI holds the interview for 4 hours, then runs it, incorporating the comments by the spokesperson that he gives in a briefing.
In the briefing, not relating to the Chinese ambassador's interview, but relating to China. And those remarks by the spokesman were very critical of China. You would know that.
Yes. So this was the sequence of events.
Yes, absolutely.
Now, so what happened after that? Then PTI put out its the full interview again and protested to the Chinese embassy?
They didn't put out the full interview. They did a story.
Yeah.
I understand they wrote a strong letter to the ambassador, pointing out that the embassy had played foul here.
Right. So PTI comes across not looking very, it doesn't look good the way PTI has handled this. You would admit?
It doesn't look good the way they handled it. They should have brought out that the ambassador was questioned on the Chinese actions, which I believe they asked, but they didn't put it in the copy. So that was an error of judgment. That was wrong. For example, I think the Chinese ambassador acknowledged that there have been casualties on the Chinese side.
Right.
This would be the first, you would know it, this would be the first Chinese official person of a high rank acknowledging that there were Chinese casualties. There have been 1 or 2 reports in Chinese state-owned media, but they are not from government. The ambassador represents China.
Yes.
So he said there were casualties on both sides. Regrettably, PTI did not even carry that as part of the interview. It's a lapse of judgment, I would say.
Right. So subsequently, there is a part 2 in this story, which is that the Indian ambassador in Beijing, Mr. Vikram Mishri, also does an interview with a PTI correspondent based in Beijing.
Yeah, that's what I saw in the newspapers, yes.
Yeah, where he puts out India's point of view on the Chinese incursions into Indian territory.
Yes. That's what I saw in the media, yes.
Okay. But there doesn't seem to be a controversy about that.
I don't know, you should tell me.
Okay, we'll leave that aside. But let me just come back to you about the PTI story and why do you think this has become such a big controversy?
I don't know why it should become a... I mean, to question PTI's patriotism, I will tell you, some of the most distinguished Indians have guided the destinies of PTI in these 7 decades. These have included Justice H.R. Khanna, who, as you know, defied Mrs. Indira Gandhi during the emergency with his judgment.
Right.
These have included Mr. Nani Palkhiwala, Mr. Fari Nariman, former Chief Justice Barucha, and a whole lot of other distinguished Indians. Today's PTI board again has a former Chief Justice of India, a former Foreign Secretary of India, plus the doyens of the Indian media industry. They all sit on the board. Do you think that they would allow anything which is detrimental to national interests? It's unthinkable.
In fact, I would actually say that the impression is, in some quarters, is that PTI is close to the government. And if you remember that during the emergency, Mrs. Indira Gandhi, and you were in PTI at the time, Mrs. Indira Gandhi merged all the news agencies and created a new one called Samachar.
Yes, I know. That's true. I mean, when you say that PTI is close to the government,
seem to be close.
Now you know, as a journalist, the government is the largest source of news. So
Right.
You want to have good relations with the government, which doesn't mean that you will color your news either in favor of the government or against the government. The articles of association of PTI say that PTI will cover news objectively and accurately without any bias. And any editorial head of PTI, and I was the editorial head for 21 years,
Right.
is bound by those articles of association. And you are then accountable to the board of directors. And I give you an idea of the distinguished people who sit in that board of directors.
Right.
So you will be held accountable. You want good relations with the government because they are the source of news.
Yes.
But you want also have, I mean, I have had the honor of receiving leaders of all political parties who came to PTI, which they never went to any other media organization, I can tell you, and across political spectrum. I can tell you, year after year, Mr. Jaitley, whether he was in the government or in the opposition, he would come and have lunch with our editors. Mr. Nitin Gadkari, when he was BJP president, he was our guest. Mr. Chidambaram, when he was finance minister. Mr. Kanshi Ram. I can give you a whole long list. The chief ministers of various states, whether BJP, non-BJP, because PTI is a neutral, unbiased news organization. I remember when PTI celebrated its golden jubilee, President K.R. Narayanan came to PTI head office in Delhi to release a commemorative stamp.
Right.
And he said that India attained freedom in news only with the establishment of PTI. I mean, India attained freedom in news only with the establishment of PTI.
So then what do you make of these strong words that are being used today by Prasar Bharati, ostensibly an autonomous broadcaster?
I mean, as I said, it's unfortunate. And it's rubbish. I mean, it's sad that they should question the... I mean, you're saying the PTI is working against the national integrity, national integration. I don't know what's the word used.
Right. It is against
territorial, India's territorial...
undermining India's territorial integrity.
Yeah, but how can a news agency which is apolitical, which has got such a distinguished board, undermine territorial integrity?
Mr. Razdan, tell me, during the Kargil conflict in 1999, you were again head of PTI at the time.
Yes.
Give me an example of how the atmosphere was then. Then Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee was actually an acting Prime Minister. He had lost the no-confidence vote, if you remember.
Yes.
He was Prime Minister and he won the war for India. He won the Kargil conflict for India. as head of PTI at the time, how did you?
We had no problems. We had reporters in Kargil. So I remember one particular instance, we had put out a story with which the army had a problem. And the then army chief, he spoke to me. I said, okay, I'll check with the reporter. And the reporter stood by his story. And we retained the story. I spoke to the army chief again, and he says, fine. If you are convinced, I have no issues with that. So there was no issue. There was no problem. There was no problem.
Any other incident that you can think of in which you and the government perhaps did not see eye to eye?
Oh, there would be lots of. We did an RTI about the travels of President Pratibha Patil.
Mm-hmm.
So the answer after several weeks showed that a huge amount was spent on her travels. So she was obviously upset with that. And PTI always has been on the flights of the president.
That's right.
And when they travel abroad.
Yeah.
In the next trip, we were dropped from the media party accompanying the president.
I see.
We stood our ground and they changed their mind. So, you will have those episodes, but another instance I can tell you, you had, was the Puducherry Chief Minister, Mr. Narayan Swamy now?
Yes.
He was the Minister of State in PMO, and he had said something which we ran, which put him in a controversy. He denied it. We put out an audio of what he had said. And thereafter, we didn't hear from him. So we have had these run-ins here and there. But we have generally had very cordial relations with governments, political parties, all newsmakers. We have had no issues. And that's how it should be, News agencies
this is an unusual time.
This is the first time I have seen a subscriber say that you are undermining the territorial integrity. And I would like to tell you that the 7 crores that Prasar Bharati pays PTI is about 7% of its subscription revenue. It's not that PTI is surviving on this. But I still hope that Prasar Bharati and PTI are able to sort it out. Because PTI input into these hundreds of news bulletins of both AIR and Doordarshan is very, very substantial.
Right.
And it will be good to have good relations and to retain the subscribers. But then that is for the Prasar Bharati to decide and PTI authorities. I don't know what's happening behind the scenes. I have no idea.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mr. Razdan. And this is an interesting conversation, especially because just a few days ago, India has commemorated the 45th anniversary of the emergency. And and I know I wasn't a journalist then, but you were.
I was a journalist then.
Yes, that's right. And the press was made.
I find it sad that those who, worked against the emergency at that time, those who were jailed, some of those should be today attacking an independent media organization. That's sad. But I hope this is a passing storm. I hope things are sorted out. Sooner the better.
Thank you so much, Mr. Razdan, for your time. Please watch the print, read the print, follow us on our social media channels. And thank you again.
Thanks again. Bye.